Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. Just wanted to say thank you to all my most recent subscribers and people who have liked and commented on my videos. I appreciate it very much. And if you guys like the content, if you find yourself new here and you like the content, don't forget the video a thumbs up, or don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and also subscribe to the channel, as I will be here always reporting boxing news and UFC news, fighting news, stuff of that source. And that leads me to this conversation of today. So, from what I'm hearing, it is very possible that the WBO is going to order Anthony Joshua versus Oleksandr Usyk. And I think this is a very interesting fight. I remember watching Oleksandr Usyk first when he appeared on HBO. And I wasn't overly impressed with him when I first seen him. I thought that he was just a straightforward fighter. I thought that, he was slow. I wasn't overly impressed with him, and he wasn't really fighting overly great opposition his first couple of fights. But then, I didn't really start to respect his skill set until I believe he faced that one Polish fighter. Did he also face who the hell is that one German fighter? Marco Huck? Did he face Marco Huck? I'm not sure if he faced Huck. He might have. But Oleksandr Usyk definitely got my respect when he started facing people like Murat Gassiev. And he started facing other people that were pretty decent in the cruiserweight division. And then I actually realized how talented the cruiserweight division was. You had Junior Dordikos, you had Murat Gassiev, you had Oleksandr Usyk in there, Tony Bellew was in there, who's a pretty decent fighter. That division, in a way, was actually stacked with great talent. And Oleksandr Usyk ended up unifying the whole entire division. So it took a little bit for Oleksandr Usyk to actually get my respect. But when it comes down to it overall, he certainly has it today. And Oleksandr Usyk is a real deal fighter. But the big question is this. Can he compete at heavyweight? Now, we've seen him in a couple of fights. There was one fight that he had against, I believe his name was Chaz Witherspoon. Thought he looked pretty good. Ended up stopping him, but not really a high-quality opponent. Then in his next fight, he stepped up in class quite a bit against Derek Chisora. And that's a pretty good fight. Derek Chisora is not necessarily a top 10 guy, but he is a top 15 guy, a top 20 guy around there. Probably a top 15 guy. Derek Chisora is always a tough fighter. But when it comes down to it, man, I thought he looked pretty good in the Derek Chisora fight. I thought that the scorecards actually were a bit closer than what they should have been. I thought it was more of a dominant performance by Oleksandr Usyk. But the big question is this. Can Oleksandr Usyk defeat someone like an Anthony Joshua, or a Tyson Fury, or a Deontay Wilder? Because we all know those are the main three of the heavyweight division. And that's the big question. And can he give problems to someone like an Anthony Joshua? I was watching this one video by this one boxing channel, probably my favorite boxing channel. Probably my favorite boxing channel by the name of Hatman Strikes Back. And if you guys haven't checked out that channel, I definitely suggest that you guys do. I think it's a great channel. And when it comes down to it, he had a video where he said, where the title was something like, Oleksandr Usyk and Michael Hunter, don't stand a chance against Anthony Joshua, these other guys. And in the video, he was saying that, basically those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it, or whatever those words are. Basically meaning that, if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're bound to repeat them over and over and over again. And his point in the video, was that just because you have these guys that look small for the heavyweight division, just because you have these guys that are cruiserweights that go up to the heavyweight division, doesn't mean that they can't make a pop in the heavyweight division, that they can't be good. And he brought up Evander Holyfield. And for those of us that know who Evander, the real deal Holyfield is, Evander Holyfield did not start off at his career at heavyweight. He started his career off at cruiserweight. Evander Holyfield was not a natural heavyweight throughout his career. And many people criticized Evander Holyfield throughout his career. Now, I was not necessarily around during the Evander Holyfield time, but you don't necessarily have to be to know the criticisms that Evander Holyfield was getting throughout his career. People were saying that Evander Holyfield was too small, that he didn't have enough punching power, all this other stuff. That's why they thought he was going to get destroyed by Mike Tyson. Not only that, but he had lost to Riddick Bowe at that time, in the third match by knockout. He also had a couple of other tough fights against Burt Cooper and was taking certain people to decisions that probably, he shouldn't have, at least in many people's eyes. So it is what it is. And then we all know what happened in both Mike Tyson fights. Evander Holyfield ended up outdoing Mike Tyson in the first fight, and then the rematch, we know what happened there. So basically what his point was is that, don't underestimate Oleksandr Usyk and Michael Hunter just because they're taking some people the distance, because you would have been the same ones underestimating Evander Holyfield against Mike Tyson. And he's correct, I believe. What I'll say is this. Do I believe that Oleksandr Usyk is the same as Evander Holyfield? No, I don't. And a certain amount of people now, what Hatman might say back to me is that, well, Oleksandr Usyk is bigger than Evander Holyfield. That's not necessarily my point when it comes to an Oleksandr Usyk. The thing is with Oleksandr Usyk versus an Evander Holyfield is just a greater athlete than Oleksandr Usyk is. And it's not that Oleksandr Usyk is a bad athlete. He is a tremendous athlete. But Evander Holyfield was a tremendous athlete as well. And Evander Holyfield, from what I've seen in his career, did have more pop in his punches, at least the later part of his career. And whatever you want to allege, sir, is whatever you want to allege. But I've heard some allegations about that. When it comes down to it, I believe Evander Holyfield had more pop in his punches. I believe Evander Holyfield was faster than Oleksandr Usyk. And I believe that he was more skilled than Oleksandr Usyk. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder are going to be necessarily a Lennox Lewis or something like that. But when it comes down to it, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury, I do think have enough to beat Oleksandr Usyk. That's just my prediction. If I had to predict, I think the main three heavyweights in the heavyweight division, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and Anthony Joshua, I personally would predict that Oleksandr Usyk would probably lose to all three of them. But that being said, this is probably the most interesting fight that he could have taken in his next fight. I think it might be a little bit too much of a step up for Oleksandr Usyk. I think that he should have fought some of the other top contenders first before this fight were to possibly happen. But when it comes down to it, this is a great fight. This is another top contender in Anthony Joshua's career if this fight were to happen. And let me tell you something. Anthony Joshua is still trying to figure out the fighter that he is. You can tell that in that Kubrat Pulev fight, because of the Andy Ruiz, little duo, when it comes down to the overall the two fights that he had with him, he is still trying to figure out his identity as a fighter. He is still trying to figure out what he needs to do and overall what's the best way to go about things. And the interesting thing is that Anthony Joshua might have the most difficult time against someone like an Oleksandr Usyk, debatably, out of the main three heavyweights, either him or Tyson Fury, because if you ever noticed about Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, they have the biggest problems with fighters that are smaller than them. Deontay Wilder doesn't really have a big issue with fighters that are smaller than him. He has issues with fighters that are the same physical dimensions as him. So when Deontay Wilder faces an opponent that has similar reach to him and similar height to him, he doesn't handle it very well because he's just never usually been trained against guys like that before. And a certain amount of people are going to say, well, he's sparred with Vladimir Klitschko and all that. Understandable. But Deontay Wilder, what I should say overall is not trained with them. He's not used to usually really facing that type of competition. He wasn't usually used to facing guys that had his own same physical dimensions. And if they did, they weren't really that great of opposition. The guys overall that are top tier and have his same reach and overall have his same height and around there, like people like a Luis Ortiz who have a longer reach than Deontay Wilder, a lot of trouble with Luis Ortiz both times. Tyson Fury, we've seen what happened in both fights. It is what it is. All right, and even Gerald Washington, who's a C-class fighter, but overall was able to give Wilder a very tough fight for about 5 rounds. So it is what it is. But when it comes down to it, Anthony Joshua, especially, just talking about this fight, he has problems with more of the speedier, great movers overall that can possibly catch him on the inside. He has trouble with the smaller guys. Sometimes Anthony Joshua does become a deer in headlights when it comes to those small guys. When he was against Joseph Parker, he looked very uncomfortable. when he was against Andrew Ruiz in both fights, even though he dominated in the rematch, and I thought that he should have been very proud of that performance. Of course, many people criticized him, but that's what they're going to do, especially the Mexican fan base. The Mexican fan base is very, very passionate about their boxing, and they do not like performances like that, usually what you'll come to find if you have experience with boxing fans. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this: Anthony is still trying to figure out overall how to exercise those demons. And he's trying to figure out overall who he still is as a fighter and who he identifies as a fighter and what's the best way to go about things after those two Andrew Ruiz fights you saw in the Kubrat Pulev fight. This fight might actually be a great learning experience for Anthony Joshua. It might actually be a great learning experience for Oleksandr Usyk as well. If this fight were to happen, I would actually be extremely excited for it because I personally believe, and partially this is because Hatman convinced me with one of his videos, which I thought was very informative. I'm partially convinced that Oleksandr Usyk could actually give Anthony Joshua a potential amount of problems. He could potentially beat Anthony Joshua if Anthony Joshua is not careful. Now, personally, do I believe that Anthony Joshua is going to lose to Oleksandr Usyk? Most likely not. But I think this fight actually is a certain amount greater than what a certain amount of people realize. This fight is a very great matchup. It's not just a great matchup because not only are you getting two great fighters in this matchup, it's what entails around it. Oleksandr Usyk, we're still trying to figure out overall where he belongs in the heavyweight division. We know that he's very technical. We know overall that he's not as great of an athlete as like an Evander Holyfield was or something like that. But, we never know until he actually gets in the ring with those guys. We'll see what happens. And for Anthony, we know he is a great athlete. He is debatably the best heavyweight in the world. You could debate. And when it comes down to the overall, Anthony Joshua is still trying to figure out his identity as a fighter. And what better opponent to exercise those demons against than a very slippery, defensively responsible, quick mover like an Oleksandr Usyk against a style that Anthony Joshua usually would have very, big problems against. Because Oleksandr Usyk is going to be a smaller guy by a decent amount. So it is what it is in terms of reach, height, weight, everything. So I find this fight to be very interesting. I find it to be a very interesting matchup because Anthony is still trying to figure out where he is as a fighter. And not only that, but Anthony Joshua always had problems with these types of fighters before. So it's going to be very interesting. I think if this fight happens, it would be a great, great matchup. And I would be thoroughly impressed with either man who wins this fight. So, it is what it is. But we'll see what happens. And we'll see what happens if he were to possibly lose this fight. We'll see if Oleksandr Usyk were to face Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury. If he wins this fight overall, we'll see if he were to face one of those two. That would be truly interesting if Usyk somehow were to beat those guys. Now, in my opinion, I think he loses to all three. But it is what it is. We'll see what happens. I just think it's very interesting, guys. I'm very excited for the possibility of this fight. I think a lot of people don't really realize how great of a potential fight this could be. And that's really about it for today. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think on this, and I'll talk to y'all later.